Hello, you're very welcome along to another RTÉ Rugby podcast. The URC quarterfinals confirmed, locked and loaded. We've got Heineken Champions Cup semi-final this weekend, Leinster and Toulouse, and also the final round of the TikTok Women's Six Nations. And looking ahead to all of this, I have Bernard Jackman and Ian Keatley with me. Gents, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Morning.
Yeah, good, Neil, thanks.
Keith, we'll start with the big one. We said we'd have to get you on after last weekend. UL Bows lived to fight another day. 16-14 win against Sligo, and Saturday week is the big one against Dungannon and Anacotty.
Yeah, it was a little bit of squeaky bum time there at the end. I think one of their players had a kick to around 7 minutes to go to take the lead, and unfortunately he just missed it. But listen, a lot of learnings came from we tried to you try and coach them so much, and then comes to like a big match, and they kind of sometimes forget what you what you've said. But a good learnings, and we're going to have to be if we play like that, we'll lose to Dungannon, I think. So hopefully we will take good learnings. We have a video session now tomorrow night, and hopefully we can fix it. They're easy fixes, but hopefully we can get on the right end against Dungannon.
I was looking back on the UL Bows Twitter, just trying to get an idea of, you know, the timeline of the game and when things were scored. There was a long gap between yourselves going 16-14 up and the full-time tweet. It must have felt like a long second half, did it?
Yeah, I couldn't tweet. I was concentrating on the match, so I couldn't tweet what was happening. Now, we got off to such a good start. I think we were like, okay, we're going to win this easily. And then, in fairness to Sligo, they're a really good team. They play a nice brand of rugby, and the conditions weren't great as well. So it kind of turned into a little bit of a kick fest and a forward battle, which is probably not where our strengths are.
Yeah, last weekend was a bit of
just listening to Keats there about the challenge of coaching. I remember Joe Schmidt was saying that at a dinner I was at, he'd met Rory Best during November, last November series, and Rory Best was brought in to coach Fiji, and he met him. He's like, "How are you getting on?" He goes, "Geez, you want to see the size of some of these Fijians, and they're so talented, like they can do anything, whatever, like they're gifted." And he goes, "But they don't do anything I tell them to do." And Joe Smith just said, "Welcome to coaching, bestie." You know what I mean? That's we all have to live with that, you know.
Yeah. So it's Dungannon 6th of May in Anacotty. That's going to be the big one.
Yeah.
Get a good crowd in there. I know it's a busy weekend with URC quarterfinals and everything, but you might get a decent crowd into Anacotty. Home advantage at the very least has got to be huge.
I heard the podcast is putting up a live stream, are they?
Well, we're looking into it. Are you busy this afternoon, Bert? Yeah.
Bert is working at that one as
well. Well, listen. Speaking of URC quarterfinals, we'll get into that now, because the final round of games, Ulster beating Edinburgh 28-14, Bulls 62-7 winners against Leinster, and a bit of a dead rubber. Well, for Leinster it was anyway. Sharks and Munster 22-all, another dramatic week for Munster, and Glasgow beating Connacht by 29 points to 27. That means all four provinces into the playoffs. Leinster, Munster and Ulster are guaranteed Champions Cup rugby at the moment. Connacht finished 7th, so they will get Champions Cup rugby unless the Sharks win the URC outright, or one of the Scarlets and Benetton win the Challenge Cup. So it's going to be a nervous few weeks for Connacht. And then the quarterfinal lineup as it stands, Ulster against Connacht is going to be the Friday night of next week at Kingspan Stadium. Leinster hosting the Sharks, Glasgow against Munster, and the Stormers and the Bulls meeting in a repeat of last season's final. Bert, we started last week talking about Munster and their brilliant win against the Stormers, and I feel we probably have to go and do it all over again this week after an epic second half comeback away to the Sharks. 22 points to 3 down in the early stages of the second half, and to be honest, looking like they were on the ropes realistically. Totally. To come back and get 2 points out of it, and to be totally honest, very nearly could have won it.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing turnaround from Munster, and an amazing collapse from Sharks. And I think Munster played their part in that. They just showed real tenacity, as they always do when they're playing their best. And then really clinical game management was spot on, and just put the Sharks under a lot of defensive pressure. And then when Munster had the ball, They're very clinical, made very few errors, and the Sharks became a basket case really, and totally blew up. And obviously they lost some players through injury during the game. But I think Munster deserve a huge amount of credit for, I suppose, turning it around and getting that draw, which could have been a win. But the draw was all they really needed. Going down there, home advantage. They were never going to get top four anyway. But to finish fifth, and have such a positive South African tour, I think no matter what happens in the playoffs, I think there's been big progress made this year with this squad, particularly given how they started the season. But with new coaches coming in, it was always going to take a little bit of time. And even though it wasn't the best attacking game of all time, Dennis Leamy would have seen areas of defense he wasn't happy with. It was that old school, being hard to beat, and taking the points and taking opportunities when they're on offer was absolutely admirable. Admirable.
Yeah, and Keith, it's two games that have just could put a completely different spin on the way the season looks. Like if you look how things were looking when they were heading down to Cape Town a couple of weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure like Graham Rowntree was being asked if there was any fear that the season was just going to fizzle out and become a bit of a damn squib after such a bad run of defeats, big defeat against the Sharks in the Champions Cup. And it felt like they were going down there with really just about hoping to get one win potentially, which would have felt like a bit of an outside shot even to begin with. And to come away from that with 7 points, finish fifth in the table when I think a lot of people would have expected it to possibly be seventh or eighth with the way the run of fixtures was going for them. It's put a completely different spin on things. They shouldn't have too much fear going to Glasgow away, because it's been a great rivalry down the years, Munster and Glasgow, and it's a game they're certainly going to be up for. And they're kind of in bonus territory now at the moment. They have their Champions Cup secured and they're into the playoffs.
Yeah, as you said there, when they lost to the Sharks in the European Cup and that big loss to Glasgow and Thomond Park, there was a few question marks. But this South African tour, has really, it's given them such a belief now going into the URC quarterfinals that it is up in the air. It's such a big match against Glasgow away that imagine if they lost it, then the season comes crashing down. But even though they drew against the Sharks on the weekend, I think they're coming away with feeling, considering the first half where they were down by 2 or 3 scores, to turn that around. And credit to the coaching staff at halftime, and credit to the players to turn it around at halftime. That even though it was a draw, I think, and as I said, they're on the line last play of the game. I think even though it was a draw, it feels like a win, and it feels like it's a great momentum boost coming into these. And they will be going after Glasgow. They felt embarrassed. They felt that they've let themselves down. Like they performed against Sharks on the weekend after being embarrassed in the European Cup. They'll feel embarrassed about losing to Glasgow in that manner, and they're going to come after Glasgow. And it's going to be, as you said there, they have some rivalry throughout the years. There's some competition between the two teams, and it's going to be a packed Scotland stadium, and it's going to be a fierce battle between them. It's always ratty, it's always niggly, and it's going to be some match, and hopefully Munster can turn them around. But after that South African trip, it's a confidence booster for the squad,
and it's good for the league all around, Bert, because there aren't enough of these cross-border rivalries between Irish and Scottish teams or Welsh and Scottish teams or things like that. It's generally derby matches, and aside from that, there isn't much. But Munster Glasgow is one of those games that has always had a real niggle down the years.
Yeah, absolutely, and we want that. That's like, when the Scarlets won the Pro for 14, they became a viable and a realistic opponent for a little while. Obviously, that slipped away. Obviously, the Welsh teams have had a struggle this year, but no, I think it's brilliant. It's set up really nicely. I think Glasgow on paper and on form, are genuine contenders for this URC, particularly if there's any hangover from Leinster, from the Heineken Cup, the Champions Cup battles that they have ahead. but Munster will fancy their chances and will go there, hugely confident. And it's probably, for me, it's probably the game of the round in those quarterfinals, the one I'm looking forward to most seeing.
The great thing about the quarterfinals, all the teams in there seem to be finding a bit of form. Like even let's just say Connacht, like they still played well against Glasgow, and they've been doing well. Ulster have found their mojo again, and the South African teams have always been quite solid throughout the season. So it's kind of leading into a really good competitive quarterfinal, which is, I think, what everyone wants to see.
And Keats, will you be doing your bit for Munster now over the next 10 days or so, texting as many of those Glasgow lads that you used to play with, getting inside their heads, throwing them a few cheap shots over WhatsApp?
Yeah, you have to. Like that's part of the game, and that's
get the intel for everyone,
They did it to me when they beat Munster in Thomond Park. So you have to throw it back, and that's part and parcel of it. But I'm really looking forward to it. I wonder if Munster have learned their lessons from when Glasgow beat them at home, or beat them in Thomond Park. Like they slowed up their ball, they're aggressive at the breakdown, and the good thing is Munster know what they're going to do. It's as if they can they handle it, and can they impose their own game plan on Glasgow.
And then before we move on from Munster, one of the interesting questions next week is going to be who starts at out half, because we spoke about Ben Healy last week, and Keats, you were saying that he's looking like a player that has got the confidence of, and I suppose the fearlessness of, well, he's finishing up at Munster at the end of the season anyway. He's been recently international capped. He's playing like a guy who's just got nothing to lose. Jack Crowley, he's not necessarily playing bad, but he isn't performing to the same level as Ben Healy at the moment. And it leaves you with the question of, for a big quarterfinal, do you go with the guy who's going to be there next year, or do you just go with the hot hand?
Yeah, you're dead right. I don't know why you're putting the pressure on me to...
Well, I'll give it to Birch as well.
I know. But in fairness, now they brought Ben on just after half time, and he did really well. Like I kind of look at him through my own tinted glasses, and like he's controlling the game well. Like he's obviously an excellent kicker, place kicker, and kicking out of hand. He did that lovely crossfield kick to Calvin Nash, who put in another lovely kick to score a nice try. Like, and he's doing really well, and that's why Graham Rowntree, like he's already had a tough decision. He dropped Joey, then he went with Jack, and now Ben's doing well. So it's a very tough decision, as you said, with Ben moving on. Do you start with Jack, and then Ben's going to come on and inject a bit of life into the team, or do you go with Ben from the start? Does Joey get a recall? It's a tough one, and that's why Graham gets paid to make these decisions. But I wouldn't like to be in his shoes.
Yeah, and Birch, I don't necessarily think it's like a massive disservice to Jack Crowley if Ben Healy was to get a start next week. At the end of the day, it's cup rugby, and you're picking the player you want. You're picking the player who's in the best form, and it doesn't. If you start Ben Healy in a quarterfinal, it's not necessarily an admission that, oh, we've got all this wrong and we were so foolish to let Ben Healy leave. Not that they let him leave, obviously, but yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's worked out quite well, him coming off the bench, to be honest. I think that dynamic for the last two games has proved to be, beneficial for Munster, and I would see them going the same way. Again, I still have massive faith in Crowley, and yeah, I think it'd be a huge call to flip them now, particularly. You've already got to rebuild that relationship with you got to regain the trust of Joey and bring his confidence through. And I think Crowley has had some moments. Obviously, Healy in his time and off the bench has has steered Munster to a win and a draw, but I'd be staying with the same, to be honest.
Very good. We'll go into more depth on that one next week. Ulster and Connacht as well is going to be the first of the quarterfinals next Friday night at 7:35 at Kingspan Stadium. You mentioned Connacht, Keats, earlier on. Like, might be slightly disappointed they didn't go and get the win. Played pretty well overall. I know Glasgow were resting a lot of players, but Connacht at the same time at the weekend were without Bundyaki and Mac Hansen. And I think if you were to have offered Andy Friend on day one of this season, you're going to finish 7th. Champions Cup isn't necessarily in your hands, but you still have a very good shot at getting it, and you're into the playoffs. I reckon Andy Friend would have bitten your hand off.
Yeah, you did right. Just before Christmas time, Munster and Connacht would have taken what they're dealt with now. But yeah, Connacht have, as I said earlier on, their final form. They had a great performance against Connacht last week with Bundy. Bundy coming back to form, and he looked like he was invested in the club. And maybe it's because it's come down to knockout rugby. He seems energetic. He seems alive, which is like he's the heartbeat of their team. If he's playing well, the whole team ticks well, and it's great to have him back. And as you said there, I know he didn't play against Glasgow, but just from the win against Cardiff, it just gave them that confidence. And I know they didn't win against Glasgow, but that's another performance to build on, leading into what I think they're not going to fear Ulster up there like they've. We talked about derby matches and big rivalries, and there's a big rivalry between Ulster and Connacht, and I think it's going to be a great encounter up in the Kingspan Friday week. So I actually couldn't tell you who's going to win that. I think it's going to be a real physical battle, and I'm looking forward to Bundy and Mac getting back. And like this competition for Irish places. Like you're probably going to have Stuart McCluskey against Bundy. You probably have Stockdale who against Mac Hansen. He wants to prove himself, his worth. So there's a lot of like little tiny battles within the two teams.
Yeah, it's set up quite nicely next week, Birch. As Keith was saying there, like Connacht aren't necessarily going to have too much fear going up there. I know Ulster finished the season quite well, and Ulster will have home advantage, but it's a place that Connacht are used to playing. It's opposition that Connacht are used to playing, and that probably does balance the scale ever so slightly.
Yeah, it's a hell of a lot better than if they had beaten the Glasgow, they would have went to the Stormers. So
yeah,
I'm not saying Ulster obviously a higher seed, but the no travel, the fact that there's that regularity that they play each other with. I think Connacht did very well to be as close as they were to Glasgow, given the fact they lost both props to HIAs. Bundy obviously was sick. Keane Prendergast went off. I thought Seamus Hurley-Langton has really grown into a URC player this year. Really good signing again. Even, poor start, but looks to be bang there now in terms of an option for him to start next year in a good back row. And Ulster just not maybe blowing you away with their form. It
was a stuttering performance on Friday against Edinburgh. I would have expected them to get a bonus point probably against Edinburgh. Given Edinburgh his performance this season, and it is some nice stuff. Cooney was excellent and has kind of reconfirmed that he's number one, I think. And obviously the contract is all sorted out now, so he knows where his future is, and Ulster know they can continue to build a team around him, but obviously with Doak pushing him. It's look, if you fancy Ulster, but Connacht is certainly not without a chance, and their form has been very, very good. Jack Carty's back in form. Their attacking shape is asking a lot of questions of no matter who they play against. And I think that having that easier run of fixtures, which they had after Christmas, they obviously got the wins they needed to get Champions Cup rugby. If as long as Scarlets or Benetton don't win the Challenge Cup, but looks like I think they'll be okay in that regard. And obviously getting into the playoffs is a good season for them, I think, and they will go there looking to send Andy Friend out in a high and stay in this competition. Yeah, we look forward to those games. They're going to be next week. For now, though, we are going to focus our attention on Leinster against Toulouse in the Heineken Champions Cup semi-final. Saturday, 3:00 Aviva Stadium. It's going to be live on RT2 and RT Player, live commentary on RT Radio 1 as well. Birch, it's set up perfectly because Leinster, we know, home advantage to the Aviva Stadium. They've had 2 weeks to prepare specifically for this game with the shadow squad out in South Africa. Toulouse, I know they were beaten at the weekend, but they rested all the frontliners as well. it's two sides who have been able to put pretty much all their eggs into this basket for the last couple of weeks, and hopefully we should get the rewards from that now on Saturday.
Okay, for me, it's the game I've looked forward to most since Ireland France. I think we all that week thought that was going to be a special game, and we got it. One of the best Six Nations games, the best Six Nations first half for a long time. And this game is set up. I mean, you look at the individuals. Unfortunately, obviously, James Lowe isn't fit to play, and he's an individual that I love watching. And it's a big loss to Leinster, not just in his ball carrying ability and his power, but his left foot is going to be hard to replace. And certainly when I speak to people in French rugby, what France and Toulouse saw in that Ireland France game was the variety of exits that Leinster have, the variety of kickers they have, and if you look at how France adapted post that game, they tried to mix it up in a similar way, and there's no doubt that Toulouse will also be very conscious of allowing Leinster play high ball and play time, allow Leinster dominate the kicking battle, and will stay patient. So I think it's a game that will be very tactical for a while, and then both teams will just let loose. Because Leinster, that's how they tend to do it. They're cagey enough, but they want to play, and Toulouse as well will know that they have to take some risks to be able to beat this Leinster team, and they have the individuals to do it. And I think they're coming over, or they're coming over very soon to Carton House. So they're basically treating this like they call it in France Operation Commando. Where it's like an army thing. You go in to camp, and everything is about this game. So they've identified this as being huge for them, and it's two unbelievable teams. It's the most dangerous game Leinster have had all season, to be fair. Obviously they've lost to the Bulls, but this is the first time that Leinster's first choice team will be looking at a team that I think would really put fear into them, and that often can get the best out of them as well. So it's going to be brilliant.
Yeah,
it's interesting that Operation Commando that you're talking about. I noticed it around when we played Racing in the semi-final a few years ago. They came down 2 days before, and it's kind of something that the French teams are starting to do now. Is they don't like coming the day before the game. They like coming 2 days before the game, get settled, then they do a little captain's run, and they take all that travel, which it's actually it's a huge benefit to come over 2 days before a game, get settled. So as Bert said there, the French teams are starting to take Europe a lot more seriously, starting to take semi-finals, quarterfinals a lot more seriously, and it will be, as Bert said there, it's going to be some match. And I think I heard an interview there during the week. I think I can't remember who was saying it, but he said, "Oh, against Leinster, we just have to work on our connections." And I was like, it's a bit more than just working on your connections to beat Leinster. So it's going to be. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's the equivalent of a final. I feel two of the best teams in Europe, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and Keith, I think for some people, not intelligent rugby people like yourselves, for some people, last year's 40-17 Leinster win in the semi-final has kind of put an idea into a lot of people's heads that this is, if Leinster play their best, they'll win comfortably. It's really not necessarily the case, because, if you look back at that game for Toulouse, it was 7 days on from going through extra time and penalties against Munster in Dublin as well, and having to return to all of that. And you could see within 20 minutes of that semi-final last year that they were absolutely jaded. This time around, all the frontliners sat out last weekend, and it's going to be the two sides with the best 15s they have available, fully fit and ready to go.
Yeah, and that's what I felt last year when after the extra time with Munster, they look jaded, as you said, in that first 20 minutes, and as you said there, they know how big this match is, and sure, are they both going for 5 stars? Are they?
No, they're going for 5. They're going for 6.
They're going for 6. So, but there is a little competition within it. Leinster and Toulouse, the two best teams in Europe. So there is that other rivalry as well. Who is going to be the best team in Europe overall? And as I said, they rested their players, and they will be hurt from that semi-final last year against Leinster to lose by that amount. there's a lot of French players Toulouse players who played France against Ireland. They'll be hurt by that loss as well. There's so many different side plots to this game. It's really building to going to be a really exciting match, and everyone has that blueprint that they think to beat Leinster they need to beat them up physically, go after the breakdown. You need to slow up their ball. So it's going to be interesting to see if Toulouse take on those tactics, which it's their game plan anyway, to use their weight, their big men, to try and beat up Leinster, to try and get on the ball, to slow up ball, look for poaches. And Leinster are going to try and keep a high intensity game, try and move Toulouse around like they did in the quarterfinal last year. They just blitzed them in the first 20 minutes. So there's all these little side plots that I'll be looking for on Saturday to see tactically that little game of chess within the game, how each team are going to play it.
And Birch, you kind of said earlier on, it's a game you've looked forward to most since probably the Ireland-France Six Nations first half. And given the overlap of players between those two sides, it's very easy to make this almost like an Ireland against France, more or less test match. But are there differences, subtleties between the two sides in terms of how they play, or are we actually looking at more or less an Ireland against France selection?
No, I think actually Leinster obviously are very similar to how Ireland play, with some differences, but they in general they are quite similar, and that makes sense because there's so many players the same. Toulouse have a lot, but they have likes of Arnold, Miafu, non-French who certainly give them a bit of steel. Willis obviously has been very good for them since he joined from Wasps, and I think that Toulouse have probably less pragmatic than France. Ball on man, Stade Toulousain. So basically, keep the ball in hand is Stade Toulouse way. So when they come in as a 4 or 5 year old, that's what the coaches tell them. Ball in hand is the Stade Toulouse DNA. So they do want to play. They want to run from deep. They want, particularly off counterattack or disorg, they call it. So turnover ball is gold to them. They're probably the best in the competition of that. So Leinster will have to be really, really careful on turnover, on any loose kicking. That's where they'll hurt you. And we saw them rip the Sharks apart. Now look at the Sharks' defense. Is anywhere near as well organized as Leinster, but they're top of the top 14. They obviously that gave them the chance to rest players. La Rochelle are obviously very close to them. I think La Rochelle, Leinster, and Toulouse, are the three best teams in the competition going into it, and now they're still in the semi-final stage, with Exeter making a bit of a late charge. So there is some similarities, obviously not the same individuals, but I think Toulouse are even more dangerous than France.
I don't even have a question beside. I just have his name written down here, Antoine Dupont. What do we want to say about him? What are we going to say about him? Let's just talk about him for a few minutes, because he's just the most joyous player to watch. I say at the moment, but he has been for a few years now, and I always feel we're very reluctant to heap too much praise on current players. It's kind of almost sacrilege to say that a current player is as good or is up there with one of the greats of all time. But Keats, it does feel like if you're making your list of the top 3 or 4 players of all time at the moment, Antoine Dupont, for me anyway, he has to be up there.
Yeah, and do you know what I love about him is just his cool demeanor. Like, you never see him angry or raise his voice. He just has this steel about him that goes around. Like, he's their captain, but you never see him, like, he comes in, might just talk to them nice and calmly. You never see him getting animated or anything like that, which is what I love about him. But you just know, when he goes into that circle and he just says a few words, they all just look at him and they all just go, yeah. And the best compliment is he doesn't have any, like, you can't say he does this, like, he doesn't, you can't defend him because he's just he's not erratic, but he just sees space and he's able to exploit it. And he's so good at getting on those inside balls, connecting the play. He sees a tiny gap and he's able to go for that gap, but then someone might step in and he's able to step around it. And he's just undefendable. Like, you can put in your best plan. I'm sure Leinster have talked about, okay, anything around the fringes. If there's a little, if Toulouse make a little break, we have to be on the fringes again because he's going to go. He's just, you just can't defend him because he just, and I suppose that's the biggest compliment. You can't put a game plan around defending apart from getting your connections around that 10, 20, 30. And even if you do that, he'll still be able to pull out passes to exploit the guys on the wing who you're not covering.
Yeah, like if you're trying to deal, is it a case of trying to limit the damage that he can inflict rather than, like, you know, developing a game? Okay, we're gonna go out, and to beat Toulouse, we've to stop Dupont. Is it more of a case of we have to kind of limit the influence he can have?
Yeah, I don't think you can stop Dupont. Yeah, like you need to stop Dupont. You need to almost take away their quick forward ball. You need to stop them offloads. You need to slow down their breakdown so he's not able, because once they make a little bit of gain line and the ball is there presented, he picks and goes. So you need to almost nullify the things that happen before you can let Dupont do that. But like it's happened, like with the size of Toulouse mountains that they have, like they will get over the gain line. They will get quick ball every now and again, and Dupont will have a go. And it's just, if he does, just to try to almost corral him, defend the numbers, and just work hard. Like that's why I was trying to find a way how you do stop him. You can't stop him. You just need to nullify the threats around Dupont. How
do you go about dealing with him, Birch?
Yeah, I agree with Keith. I think you got to slow down. You got to mess with the breakdown. And actually, ironically, some of his best moments have come from teams who've counter-rucked Toulouse breakdowns, and the ball pops out. And because the people who've counter-rucked are quite close to the ruck, he's exploited that as well. So it's a dangerous game, basically overcommitting to attacking rucks to try and disrupt him, because he has this fend of both hands and speed off the mark to basically cause damage. Obviously, his support lines are high profile. He generally is that person who gets that second touch after a line break and is leaking from that range as well. He kicks off both feet really well, but deceptively powerful. Like I've seen him manhandle, you know, big front five forward. So yeah, I totally agree with Keith. I think you're not going to be able to stop him. You just got to make sure that anytime he has the ball, all defenders in and around the ball are very much focused on him potentially slipping that first tackle or breaking that first tackle and being able to jam in. So phenomenal. When you think back, I mean, Cast had him. So he came through the Osh Academy. They got relegated to Federal 1. Cast got him as an 18-year-old, and as a 20-year-old, I think Toulouse, you know, paid a transfer fee to get him to be part of. It's kind of like the class of '92 with Ferguson, where, you know, Beckham is the outsider, even though he obviously, Ferguson signed him as a 13-year-old. But he joined Gary Neville and those lads. Like Dupont has come through now with Dupont, Ramos, etc. That group from that academy, and Toulouse have built a team around them, and their age profile, what is he, 26, 27? You know, they could be at the top of the game, both international and club game, for 3 or 4 years. It's an amazing piece of business to be able to keep him. And ironically, I think one of the reasons that they had to sell Cheslin Colby was he wanted to be paid, or his agent wanted to be paid the same money as Dupont. And obviously Cheslin Colby's a brilliant player, but as a winger, you know, he wasn't able to have the influence on the game. So they sold him to Toulon for a big transfer fee, and were able to bring through some more young talent. And ironically, Toulon are now selling him to a Japanese club for $1 million. So it's not the same type of transfers that happen in soccer, but there's a bit of a transfer market in French rugby anyway.
Yeah, I think Antoine Dupont's next few contracts is just going to be zeros added to it every single time. If Antoine Dupont clearly isn't a weakness Leinster can go after, lads, whoever wants to jump in this one can fire away. Where is there a weakness, or where is there an opportunity for Leinster to take advantage of Toulouse and get on top this weekend?
It's it's difficult. Like Leinster, obviously, I know they had a hiccup on the weekend, but that's probably their second or third team. Like they do have very, very little. Oh, sorry. We're talking about Toulouse weaknesses, aren't we?
Yeah, or just kind of opportunities that Leinster can exploit.
Sorry, that's what my train of thought went. They're very well organized, Leinster are, and they're so well connected. Like they don't do long loopy passes, they do short connected passes. Everyone's very good at being a playmaker, running on holes, and a bit of that blueprint. What they did to Toulouse last year, like they need to keep the tempo up. When Toulouse, if it's a slow game, and that's what Toulouse are trying to do. Toulouse are trying to slow up Leinster's breakdown so they can get the defensive line set. Leinster need to be very good at their decision making, putting guys through holes, and getting quick ruck ball, and then they're very good on the front foot, and that's where like I think Toulouse will try and slow it up. They'll take that blueprint from what La Rochelle did to Leinster last year in the final, or 2 years ago in the final. That's how you beat Leinster. You try and slow it up. So Leinster on the flip side are going to try and keep the tempo up, keep the speed high. Don't let Toulouse rest. They'll look for multi-phase 6, 7, 8+ phases, and then that's where they'll get their tries. And once again, Leinster are also very good at their set piece maul and attack off their maul. I think that's where they got most of their tries this year. Like they over the last 2 weeks, they would have put together set piece plays that are going to exploit Toulouse on either the first, second, third phase, and that's where if I was attacking Toulouse, I'd be going after them set piece and then multi-phase, keep the intensity high.
And Bertram, we heard from Leo Cullen on Monday. He's doing an excellent job over the last while of really bringing up this siege mentality. And I saw someone comparing it to what the John Kiley, the Limerick hurling manager, was doing on Sunday as well, saying, you know, we're not building ourselves up, you're building ourselves up, and almost turning it into, you know, motivation for themselves. But as Leo Cullen rightly points out, for as much as people are talking them up, they haven't won anything. Okay, like they won a URC title 2 years ago. They won nothing last season. They haven't won Europe in 5 years. And there doesn't seem to be any signs within that camp that there is any complacency whatsoever.
No, absolutely. And Leinster haven't internally been out there saying we're the greatest. I think it's all been us.
It's been us.
Yeah. And in fairness, like it's admirable what they do week to week. And this year when they were, when they weren't coasting, when Ulster were, ahead of them in the RDS and Cian Healy had a red card, Leinster just put the foot down and ended up winning, pulling away. And likewise, the Stormers came to the RDS, and it wasn't Leinster's full strength team, but they went behind and they fought back. So, even when they haven't been, all getting everything their own way, as pundits, as fans, as opposition coaches, I think, Dan McFarland, Richard Wigglesworth, etc., who were the last coaches to kind of come up against Leinster and come out the wrong side of it. I think there's a lot of admiration and envy to a certain extent about what they've built. So Leo is obviously really pushing this fact that they haven't won anything yet. But I think these players know that. I certainly meet Leinster players around the place, and they're very conscious that they haven't got the trophies that they feel will validate their hard work, and there's no doubt I don't think complacency has played a part in that. They just haven't been as good as their opposition. La Rochelle were brilliant in the final last year, the way they managed that game. So there's no shame in it. It's been interesting actually to see Leo kind of being so out there with the media and try and push his points around that it's not a foregone conclusion, which I don't think it is. I think we all realize how hard to win it is to win Europe, and the fact that the 2019, the 2020, 21, 22 team didn't win it is disappointing. But that's what you want. You want a competition which is incredibly difficult to win, and if they win it this year, they'll have earned it. But it's us as pundits praising them, and we're praising them because they're so efficient, they're so good to watch, they're so consistent, and I don't I genuinely don't think it's coming internally from their point of view, but Leo's making sure that we're aware that it's not.
And a question for both of you then: if Leinster do lose this weekend, how damaging do you think that would be? Like, for example, Leo Cullen, he volunteered the information only a few weeks ago about it somehow came up about the 2003 semi-final defeat against Perpignan, when, you know, the road was open and the door was open for them to go on and win a first Heineken Cup on home soil at Lansdowne Road. And he says he still has that match program from the game against Perpignan sitting on his desk in his office. Like, he's clearly a man who holds on to bad memories to drive them forward. But for both of you, and I'll go to you first, Keats, like, how damaging would it be for Leinster to lose with the prospect of a home final on the horizon, having gone so close last year and in 2019 as well? Like, there would have been a lot of cruel endings and a lot of disappointments for them at tough stages.
It's massive. Rugby is, like, for the people watching in, but that rugby is such an emotional game. Like, you have to be teetering on the edge of going to war. Well, it is like going to war each and every week. And imagine going to war and then losing that battle, and then telling the team, right, you need to go again after. And it takes, after a loss like that, of this magnitude, if they lost against Toulouse, it takes the guts of a while to get emotionally back up for it. And then if they did lose, to be taken on the Sharks, who will be relishing taking on Leinster. The South African teams, they almost like a challenge. They're like, oh, we get to take on Leinster in their own patch, like what we saw with the Bulls and the Stormers last year, taking Leinster on in the final. Like, that they love a challenge. So if they do lose to Toulouse, that emotional scarring, it is tough to get back up, and then they'll be coming against a Sharks team who will be relishing it, and it is tough to get back up for that. I think if they win this weekend, they probably won't play their full strength the weekend after. They'll mix it up, because they know how emotionally draining it is to get up for these matches. So they've done it well in the past. They've won big matches, and then they've tinkered with the team. They still have the main core of the team, but they bring in 3 or 4 players who will bring a bit of freshness. So, but it's emotionally, I don't think people outside of the rugby team know how emotionally connected you have to be to win these matches.
Birch?
And I think it is.
Yeah, look, obviously it'll be massively. Leinster are going through change, you know. So in a month's time, when the lads come back from preseason, it's going to be a different building, a different environment, different messages. You know, Stuart has been the voice in the dressing room since he came in. The dominant voice in the dressing room. There's no doubt about that. And he will be gone, and then, you know, Goodman will have a chance to put his, you know, philosophy into shape on attack. He's been doing the backs, but a general team attack. And then you have Jacques Nienaber coming in later, you know, coming in after the World Cup. So effectively, I imagine Sean O'Brien will be changing Leinster's system, you know, towards that Nienaber system, but it won't really come into play. And then it's going to be quite quick. You know, Nienaber comes in after the World Cup. If South Africa go deep in the World Cup, obviously then there's not a huge amount of time before next year's pool stages. So that's different. And also, like, Sexton has been like a coach there since 2009. You know what I mean? You can't underestimate his influence in that team in terms of driving that consistency, driving those standards. And while, you know, there's other leaders like Gary Ringrose, and there's lots of leaders there, Ty Furlong, loads of them, Sexton is unique. I've never come across anyone like him, you know what I mean, in rugby. So it is a time of transition, and you'd prefer they were going into that transition period on the back of having closed this out, you know. But it's over 80 minutes this Saturday, and obviously if they get the final, another 80 minutes, and we've seen how good Toulouse and La Rochelle in particular can be.
Final call on Leinster and Toulouse. Who's going to win this weekend? Someone dive in first.
Yeah, I think Leinster by 5.
Yeah, Leinster just very close. Yeah, might even be extra time.
Oh. We'll have a good day on Saturday if that's the case. I know. Look, I'd absolutely hope Leinster get through as well, and it's not through some kind of Irish partisanness. It's some superiority. It is just we haven't got to see an Irish final since 2009 with an Irish or since 1999 with an Irish team in it, and those 2003 and 2013 deciders just weren't really the same without having an Irish side in it. So it would be great to see. We will finish up, guys. The Irish women's team taking on Scotland, final round of the TikTok Women's Six Nations on Saturday evening, 7:30. Live commentary on RTÉ Radio 1. They need a bonus point win realistically to stand any chance of avoiding the wooden spoon. The only other scenario would be Italy losing to Wales by an absolutely unrealistic score, to put it that way. But Birch, if Ireland were to win without that bonus point, finish bottom of the Six Nations, but finish on a win regardless, would there be much consolation to take from that?
Yeah, look, I think it would be positive. Honestly, I think the team could really do with a win. I think it's going to be hard for them to avoid the bottom spot. Just how poorly we've been attacking. It's hard to see us get that bonus point. We haven't been attacking that poorly. We've been struggling to score points. Obviously there's a points deficit with Italy. Scotland will be buoyed by their win against Italy. They've been through a rough patch, and they've got that win that may kick them on to make them even better, may give them massive confidence. So the challenge we face this weekend is probably harder than it was 2 weeks ago on paper. Being in the third division of that WXV is far from ideal, but we're not locked into it. It'll be next year's Six Nations gives us another chance to get to tier 2 of it for the following season, which obviously would be better. And then I think in some ways I actually think it mightn't be the bad thing for us to be the dominant team in a group in a competition like that, and to get that confidence, and then obviously go into next year's Six Nations. I think if we lose this weekend, unless we can, if we were in tier 2 of the WX, well, we aren't going to be. So, I think that we need to get some games against opposition we're either level with or ahead of for a little while, to give the players that feel good factor that's massive in sport, whether it's professional or amateur, of having won, because they are working incredibly hard. So, I think it'd be great for them to win this weekend. I don't actually think it's that bad a thing for us to be in tier 3 for one season, if that helps us, be much better next year's Six Nations.
Yeah, it's only between the tiers 1 and 2 that the promotion and relegation is locked for a season. But what would you take from Saturday's game against England, Keats? Because on one hand, obviously 48-0, they're held scoreless. They've still only scored 15 points and 2 tries in the championship. But I've seen a lot of people pointing out 50 plus missed tackles, and granted that's a major issue, but I think we knew there were going to be thereabouts that many missed tackles as well, and it's 50 out of 300 plus attempted tackles. And there's also the fact that they held England scoreless for close to 30 minutes of the second half, and I think for watching that entire 80 minutes, it was blatantly obvious that they were a mile better as a team than they were 4 or 5 weeks ago in that opening game against Wales.
Yeah, I think that as the scoreline doesn't suggest, but it was a little bit of a building game to be coming against probably the best team in the competition. They did really well, and you could see. Do you see how much it means to the ladies? With all the controversy that's going on between them and the RFU at the moment, they're trying to put in their part to show how committed they are, and I hope, even if they do beat Scotland on the weekend, it will be putting a little band-aid over the problem at the moment. And I hope the two parties can come together, because they've got great support. Down in Musgrave Park, it's nearly a full house down there. And it's a big part of the RFU and women's rugby. It's growing. We can see England against France now on the weekend. I think it's in Twickenham. I think it's nearly sold out, or in front. I think it's 50,000.
50,000 tickets sold as of last week. So, you'd have to think they'll be pushing up towards 60 by this weekend.
Yeah, which is unbelievable for the sport. It's such a growing sport, and I think the two parties, the RFU and the ladies, need to sit down, come to agreement. It's both parties. The RFU need to come to the table, but also the ladies need to match that. And I think once that does happen, I think we can really see Irish ladies, the Irish women's team, kicking on, because there's a great platform there, and there's a great AIL league that goes on week in, week out, and it's something to grow the sport on. Yeah,
and Birch, there's, to go back on like the crowd there at Musgrave Park on Saturday, I was there, and you can actually see the foundations that they have if they can get this thing right, because the goodwill out there for them as a team is incredible. They're a side who've been in desperate form for quite a while now, but they were still able to bring in a pretty healthy crowd of 5,000 to Cork on Saturday. And I thought it was remarkable actually just at full time to see, I swear to God, droves of kids just queuing up and waiting to get pictures and autographs from the players, who hung around for a hell of a long time after the match to do that. And that's hugely, hugely important. We were out in Abbottstown yesterday chatting to some of the players for the usual media stuff, and they made a point of saying, like, as a team, that sort of stuff is very, very important for them, because regardless of what happens with the game in the short term, they feel like they've got a responsibility to grow it long term as well. And as Keith said, if all parties can get this thing right, there's a big opportunity for what they can do.
Yeah, look at it. There's massive support behind them, and I actually think anyone who watched that game could see the effort and desire and commitment that they were putting in, and they understand that it's going to take a while to be at that level, because England are obviously they have been they were the form team going into the World Cup, and obviously lost the final to a New Zealand side coached by Wayne Smith, who showed massive improvement over the last year. So I think it's hard. It's sometimes harder for the women when you've given everything and you lose by 48 points, and you see how much the fans appreciate you. That's often a difficult time, but they fronted up and spent time with their fans, which is brilliant. And yeah, it's just a case of being patient and waiting for, I suppose, that experience is bed in, the learnings, as they say, and fitness and all that stuff, the skill development, tactical development, and to be able to maybe not go toe to toe with England and France for a while, because that's maybe overly optimistic, but certainly to catch up with Wales again, and to be as good, if not better, than Scotland and Italy. I think that's a good short to medium term goal.
Yeah, and Keith's finally on that short to medium term goal. They only have to look at the teams around them to see what can be achieved in a relatively short space of time. Like, I know we're talking about potentially dropping into the tier 3 of the WXV when it starts later on this season, but there are big short-term gains that can be made.
Yeah, if you look at the Italy ladies team, and I like being over there, and the Italian Federation really put money into the under-20s, the underage setup, and the Irish or the Italian ladies, and you're seeing the benefits of that. The Italian under-20s have really come of age over the last 3 or 4 years, but also you can see the women's team, like they're actually playing a nice brand of rugby, and it's what Birch talked about there, that it's investing in the all-round game, like just the strategic, the psychological, the physical, the mental side of the game, that all needs to be up on par. It's not just they need to be exposed to more conditioning or thing. Like, there's so many different aspects to rugby, and you can see that if they get it right and broaden the horizons, or broaden the mindset of the ladies team, and putting the right structures in place, that there is that commitment from the ladies, and they have the fan base to kick on as well, which is nice.
Yeah, and fingers crossed they can cap it off, Ireland, with a win this weekend against Scotland. That's Saturday evening, 7:30 in Edinburgh. Scotland against Ireland, live commentary on RTÉ Radio 1. And as I said earlier, also live commentary on RTÉ Radio 1 of Leinster and Toulouse earlier on in the afternoon, and that's also on RT2 and RT player as well. But Keats and Birch, thanks a million for joining us as usual. And I'll see you at the Aviva on Saturday.
See you then.